Chapter 1. The Grand Wedding at Ashbourne Manor. The late afternoon sun cast golden rays over Ashbourne Manor, its ivy-clad towers and sprawling lawns, a testament to centuries of wealth and tradition. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, adjusted his moustache as he stepped from the chauffeured car onto the gravel drive. The air carried the scent of roses and anticipation, for tomorrow was to be the wedding of Miss Eleanor Ashbourne, heiress to the Ashbourne fortune, to Lord Cedric Harrow, a dashing aristocrat with a reputation for charm and a penchant for fast horses. Poirot had been invited as a guest of honour, a nod to his long-standing friendship with Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, Eleanor's formidable mother, who had once sought his aid in a delicate matter of stolen jewels. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal companion, emerged from the car, his eyes wide with admiration. "I say, Poirot, this place is magnificent. Quite the setting for a wedding, eh?" Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Magnificent, oui, mon ami. But even the grandest facades may conceal the most curious secrets. Observe, Hastings, the little details. These are what reveal the truth." The manor buzzed with activity. Servants scurried with trays of crystal glassware. Florists arranged cascades of lilies, and a string quartet rehearsed in the garden, their notes drifting through the open windows of the grand ballroom. Guests in elegant attire mingled on the terrace, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne flutes. Yet Poirot's sharp eyes noted an undercurrent of tension. A maid's nervous glance, a guest's whispered argument, the fleeting frown on Lady Beatrice's otherwise composed face. At the centre of the gathering stood Eleanor Ashbourne, radiant in a pale blue dress that complemented her auburn hair. She greeted guests with a practised smile, though Poirot detected a flicker of unease in her eyes. Beside her, Lord Cedric was all charm, his laughter hearty as he clasped hands with well-wishers. Among the wedding party, one figure drew Poirot's particular attention: Clara Winthrop, the bridesmaid and Eleanor's childhood friend. Clara, a slender woman with expressive green eyes and a cascade of dark curls, moved with grace but seemed distracted, her fingers twisting the lace of her shawl as she glanced toward the manor's shadowed wings. "Clara seems rather out of sorts," Hastings remarked, following Poirot's gaze. "Nerves, perhaps. Being a bridesmaid is no small task." "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, his eyes narrowing. "But nerves, they have a cause, Hastings. And Mademoiselle Clara's unease, it is more than the weight of a bouquet." The rehearsal. Dinner was held in the manor's dining hall, a cavernous room adorned with chandeliers and portraits of stern-faced Ashbourne ancestors. Poirot and Hastings were seated near the head table, where Eleanor and Cedric presided over a feast of roasted pheasant and fine wines. Lady Beatrice, resplendent in emerald silk, toasted the couple with a speech that was both gracious and commanding. Yet Clara, seated beside Margaret, her cousin, and another member of the wedding party, barely touched her food. Poirot noted her frequent glances toward the door, as if expecting someone or something. As the dessert course was served, Clara excused herself, murmuring about needing air. Poirot's gaze followed her as she slipped through a side door, her silhouette vanishing into the dimly lit corridor. He made a mental note of the time. Precisely 8 o'clock. The dinner continued, with Cedric regaling the table with tales of his travels, but Poirot's attention remained divided, his mind cataloguing the evening's observations. An hour later, as coffee was poured, a commotion erupted. Margaret, her face pale, stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. "Where is Clara?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "She hasn't returned." Eleanor's smile faltered, and Cedric's brow furrowed. Lady Beatrice signalled a footman, who hurried to check the grounds. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs rising like a tide. Poirot, ever calm, sipped his coffee and observed the reactions around him. Margaret's genuine distress, Cedric's quick glance at his brother Julian, who sat silently at the table's far end, and Lady Beatrice's steely composure, betrayed only by the tightening of her grip on her wineglass. "Hastings," Poirot said quietly. "The little grey cells, they are stirring. This is no mere case of a bridesmaid wandering off. There is purpose here, and perhaps danger." Hastings frowned. "You think something's happened to her, Poirot? But it's a wedding. Surely it's just a misunderstanding." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A misunderstanding, mon ami? No, the disappearance of Mademoiselle Clara. It is the first thread in a tapestry most intricate. We must find her, and quickly." The footman returned, breathless, reporting that Clara was nowhere to be found. Not in the gardens, the drawing-rooms, or her chamber. A search party was organised, with guests and staff fanning out across the manor's vast grounds. Poirot, however, remained in the dining hall, his fingers steepled as he surveyed the room. He noted the empty chair where Clara had sat, the untouched dessert plate, and the faint smudge of lipstick on her napkin, a detail that seemed oddly significant. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, rising. "The stage is set, the players are in place, and the mystery, it begins. Let us go to Mademoiselle, Clara's room. There, perhaps, we shall find the first clue to her vanishing." As they left the hall, the manor's grandeur seemed to take on a more ominous hue, its shadows deepening in the flickering candlelight. Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that would challenge even his formidable intellect. The case of the vanishing bridesmaid had begun. Chapter 2. The Empty Bridesmaid's Chamber. The corridors of Ashbourne Manor seemed to hold their breath as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings ascended the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the plush crimson runner. The search for Clara Winthrop had yielded nothing, and the festive air of the wedding preparations had curdled into unease. Poirot's expression was serene, but his eyes, sharp as ever, darted to every detail. The flickering sconces, the portraits of Ashbourne ancestors, the faint creak of a floorboard underfoot. "Poirot, old chap, this is dashed unsettling," Hastings muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "Clara can't have just vanished into thin air. Perhaps she's wandered off, got lost in the grounds?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Vanished into thin air, mon ami? No, no. People do not vanish without reason. There is always a trace, a motive, a misstep. We shall find it in her chamber, I think." They reached the second floor, where a maid, her apron twisted in nervous hands, led them to Clara's room. The door stood ajar, revealing a space both elegant and intimate. A four-poster bed draped in pale blue silk dominated the room, flanked by a mahogany dressing table adorned with a silver-backed mirror. A wardrobe held Clara's gowns, their delicate fabrics shimmering in the lamplight. The window overlooked the manor's gardens, now shrouded in twilight, and a faint breeze stirred the lace curtains. Poirot stepped inside, his movements precise, like a cat navigating a delicate perch. "Observe, Hastings," he said, gesturing to the room. "What do you see?" Hastings frowned, scanning the space. "Well, it's tidy. Bed's made, no sign of a struggle. Her shawl's draped over the chair there, and, hang on, her shoes are by the door. She didn't take them?" "Précisément," Poirot murmured, his gaze fixed on the dressing-table. He approached it, noting the array of perfume bottles, a pearl-handled brush, and a small velvet jewellery box. His fingers paused over a faint smudge on the mirror's edge, and with a deft movement, he lifted a folded slip of paper tucked beneath the frame. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a single line scrawled in hurried script. "The truth lies in the shadows." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Good heavens, Poirot! What does it mean? Is it a clue? A warning?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is both, perhaps, and neither. The words, they are vague, but the act of writing them, this is deliberate. Mademoiselle Clara left this for someone to find. Or perhaps someone left it for us." The room felt colder now, the shadows lengthening as the maid hovered by the door. Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, you tended to Miss Winthrop. Did she seem distressed? Did she speak of anything unusual?" The maid, a young woman named Elsie, bit her lip. "She was quiet, sir, more than usual. Kept to herself mostly. But yesterday I saw her in the garden talking to someone. A man, I think, though I couldn't see his face. She looked frightened, sir." Poirot's head tilted. "A man, you say? And where in the garden?" "Near the old fountain, sir, by the rose arbour. It was dusk, so I didn't linger." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He crossed to the wardrobe, inspecting Clara's dresses, then moved to the window, noting its latch was secure. "No one entered or left this way," he mused. "Yet she left the dinner, and now she is gone." A knock interrupted them. Margaret, Clara's cousin, stood in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything? Clara, she wouldn't just leave like this. She was so excited for Eleanor's wedding." Poirot studied Margaret's expression, noting the tremor in her voice. "Mademoiselle, when did you last speak with your cousin?" Margaret hesitated, twisting a handkerchief. "This afternoon, in the drawing-room. She was distracted, said something about needing to settle an old matter. I thought she meant wedding duties, but now—" Her voice broke. "An old matter," Poirot repeated softly. "And did she mention anyone? A name, perhaps?" Margaret shook her head, but Poirot caught the fleeting glance she cast toward the corridor. "No, nothing specific. Please, you must find her." Margaret retreated. Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see that look?" "Oui, mon ami. The eyes, they betray what the lips conceal. But let us not judge too hastily. Come, we must speak with the staff." They descended to the servants' quarters, where the butler, Mr. Grayson, a man of rigid posture and few words, awaited them. Poirot questioned him about Clara's movements, learning she had been seen entering the library earlier that day, carrying a small notebook. Grayson also mentioned rumours among the staff. Clara had been meeting someone in secret late at night near the manor's stables. Secret meetings, cryptic notes, It's like a novel, Hastings exclaimed. But what's it all mean, Poirot? Poirot's fingers tapped his temple. It means, Hastings, that Mademoiselle Clara was entangled in something she could not escape. A secret, perhaps, or a threat. The shadows she spoke of, they are not merely poetic. They are real, and they are close. As they returned to the main hall, the manor's clock struck 10, its chimes echoing like a warning. The wedding guests milled about, their voices hushed, their glances darting toward Poirot. Lady Beatrice approached, her expression a mask of composure. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you will resolve this quickly. We cannot have scandal overshadow Eleanor's day. Poirot bowed slightly. Rest assured, madame, the little grey cells are at work. But I must ask, did Mademoiselle Clara confide in you about any troubles? Lady Beatrice's lips tightened. Clara was a dear girl, but impulsive. She mentioned nothing to me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must attend to my daughter. Poirot watched her retreat, his mind racing. The empty chamber, the cryptic note, the secret meetings, all pointed to a puzzle far deeper than a missing bridesmaid. As the manor settled into an uneasy quiet, Poirot resolved to unravel the truth, no matter how dark the shadows it revealed. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Suspicion. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Ashbourne Manor's drawing-room, casting intricate patterns on the polished parquet floor. Yet the light did little to dispel the pall of unease that had settled over the household. Clara Winthrop's disappearance, now approaching its 15th hour, hung like a storm cloud over the wedding preparations. Hercule Poirot, seated in a high-backed armchair, sipped a tisane prepared by the attentive butler, Mr. Grayson. His eyes, bright and unyielding, surveyed the room where the wedding party had gathered at his request. Captain Hastings stood by, the fireplace, his brow furrowed. Poirot, this is a rum business. No sign of Clara, and the guests are getting jittery. How do you plan to proceed? Poirot's fingers traced the rim of his cup. Mon ami, when the trail is cold, one must warm it with questions. The human heart, it betrays itself in words, in glances, in the pause before a lie. We shall speak with each guest, and the shadow of suspicion, it will begin to take form. The first to enter was Eleanor Ashbourne, the bride-to-be, her auburn hair pinned elegantly despite the strain in her pale face. She clasped her hands tightly as she sat opposite Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, I can't bear this uncertainty. Clara is my dearest friend. Why would she leave without a word? Poirot's voice was gentle, probing. Mademoiselle, tell me of your friendship with Mademoiselle Clara. Was there perhaps a recent disagreement, a confidence shared? Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the window. No disagreements, no, but Clara seemed preoccupied these past weeks. She spoke of a letter she'd received, something that troubled her. She wouldn't say more, only that it was a private matter. A letter, Poirot repeated, his moustache twitching. And did she show you this letter, or mention its sender? No, she kept it close. I thought it might be a family matter. Her parents passed years ago, you know, and she's always been private about such things. Poirot nodded, dismissing Eleanor with a courteous bow. As she left, Hastings whispered, "A letter, Poirot. That could be key. Patience, Hastings. A letter is but a thread. We must weave the tapestry. Next came Lord Cedric Harrow, the groom, his easy charm tempered by impatience. He leaned against the mantel, arms crossed. "Look here, monsieur. Poirot, I don't see why we're all being interrogated. Clara's probably off somewhere, sorting out her own troubles. Weddings make people act queerly." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur, you knew Mademoiselle Clara well?" Cedric shrugged. "Well enough. She's Eleanor's friend always, about when we were courting. Nice girl, bit intense at times. Liked to ask questions. Too many if you ask me. Questions." Poirot leaned forward. "Of what nature?" Cedric's jaw tightened. "Oh, nothing serious. Family history. Old stories about the manor. She was curious about my brother Julian, too. His time abroad. I told her to leave it alone." Poirot made a mental note of Cedric's defensiveness, dismissing him with a polite smile. As Cedric exited, Lady Beatrice Ashbourne swept in, her emerald brooch glinting like a warning. Her presence filled the room, her gaze as sharp as Poirot's own. "Monsieur Poirot, this is intolerable," she declared, seating herself with regal poise. "Clara's absence threatens to ruin Eleanor's wedding. I insist you resolve this discreetly." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, discretion is my métier. But I must ask, did Mademoiselle Clara ever speak to you of troubles, perhaps concerning the Ashbourne family?" Lady Beatrice's lips pursed. "Clara was a guest, in my home, nothing more. She was charming but impulsive, always poking into old books in the library. I warned her some histories are best left undisturbed." "Old books," Poirot echoed softly. "And which books, madam?" "I didn't inquire," she snapped, but her fingers tightened on her fan. "Find her, Monsieur Poirot, and spare us further scandal." As Lady Beatrice departed, Julian Harrow, Cedric's younger brother, slouched into the room. His dark hair fell over brooding eyes, and his manner was aloof, almost defiant. Poirot noted the faint scar on his left hand, a detail that seemed oddly significant. "Monsieur Julien, you were acquainted with Mademoiselle Clara?" Poirot asked. Julian's gaze was steady, almost challenging. "We spoke a few times. She was inquisitive, asked about my travels in Italy, my work there. I didn't indulge her much." "And why not?" Poirot pressed. Julian smirked. "Some stories aren't for polite company. Clara didn't know when to stop digging." Poirot dismissed Julian, his mind racing. Each guest had revealed a thread. Eleanor's mention of a letter, Cedric's unease about Clara's questions, Lady Beatrice's warning, Julian's guardedness. The final interviewee was Margaret, Clara's cousin, who entered with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling lip. "Monsieur Poirot, I've told you all I know," she began. But Poirot raised a hand. "Mademoiselle, one more question. Did Clara ever speak of someone from her past, someone who might wish her harm?" Margaret's breath caught. She mentioned a man once, someone she'd known years ago, said he'd written to her recently, and it frightened her. I begged her to tell me more, but she refused." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Margaret left, Hastings exclaimed, "Poirot, this is a tangle. Letters, old grudges, secret meetings. What's it all mean?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It means, mon ami, that Mademoiselle Clara was at the centre of a web, and someone wished to silence her. But fear not, the little grey cells, they are untangling the threads. A sudden shout from the gardens interrupted them. A gardener burst into the room, his face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, we've found something near the lake. It's Miss Clara's glove." Poirot rose, his expression grave. "The lake, you say? Come, Hastings. The shadow of suspicion grows darker, and we must follow where it leads." The drawing-room emptied as Poirot and Hastings hurried toward the gardens, the weight of the mystery pressing ever closer. Clara's glove, abandoned by the lake, was a chilling clue, and Poirot knew the truth was lurking just beyond his grasp. Chapter 4. The Locked Garden Maze. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Ashbourne Manor, wrapping the gardens in a ghostly veil as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings followed the breathless gardener toward the lake. The discovery of Clara Winthrop's glove, muddied and abandoned near the water's edge, had sent a ripple of dread through the wedding party. Poirot's polished shoes crunched on the gravel path, his expression unreadable, though his eyes gleamed with the intensity of a hawk. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "The glove, it is not merely lost. It is placed. Someone wishes us to look to the lake, but I suspect the true path lies elsewhere." Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. "Elsewhere? You mean this is a distraction? But where else do we look, Poirot? The manor's grounds are vast." Poirot's moustache twitched. "We follow the threads, Hastings. The gardener mentioned Mademoiselle Clara near the rose arbour, and now this glove by the lake. But there is another place, one whispered of by the staff, the garden maze. It is, I am told, a place of secrets. The gardener, a wiry man named Tom, led them past the lake, its surface still and foreboding, to a wrought-iron gate set within a high yew hedge. Beyond it lay the manor's infamous maze, its twisting paths a labyrinth of shadow and silence. Tom fumbled with a heavy key, his hands trembling. "The maze is kept locked, sir, ever since, well, years ago, there was an incident. Only Mr. Grayson and Lady Beatrice have keys." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An incident, you say? And when was the maze last opened?" "Yesterday evening, sir, for the wedding preparations. Some guests wanted a tour, but it was locked again before nightfall. I saw to it myself." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. The gate creaked open, revealing a narrow path flanked by towering hedges, their leaves dense and dark. The air inside was cool, heavy with the scent of earth and greenery. Hastings hesitated, peering into the gloom. "I say, Poirot, this place gives me the creeps. It's like stepping into a trap." "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot replied, stepping forward. "And traps, they are set for a purpose. Let us see what this one holds." They ventured into the maze, Poirot's cane tapping rhythmically as he navigated the twisting paths. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional bird call. Poirot's eyes scanned the ground, the hedges, the intersections, searching for anything amiss. At a sharp turn, he paused, kneeling to examine a low branch. Snagged on a thorn was a scrap of pale blue fabric, its edges frayed. "Hastings, regardez!" Poirot held up the fabric, his fingers delicate as if handling a rare artifact. "This is silk, the same shade as Mademoiselle Clara's dress from the rehearsal dinner. Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot! She was here then? But how? The maze was locked." Poirot's gaze was thoughtful. "Locked, oui, but locks are not impenetrable. And this fabric, it is torn, not cut. She was here in haste, perhaps in flight. As they pressed deeper, the maze seemed to close in, its paths narrowing, its shadows deepening. Hastings stumbled over a root, muttering, "This place is a nightmare. How do we even know where we're going?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Mind, Hastings, it constructs a map. Left, right, forward. Each choice is a clue to the maze's design. And to the mind of the one who brought Clara here. At the maze's heart, they found a small clearing with a stone bench and a dry fountain, its basin cracked and moss-covered." Poirot circled the clearing, his eyes catching on a glint beneath the bench. He knelt, retrieving a small silver locket, its clasp broken. Inside was a faded photograph of a young man, his face unfamiliar, and an inscription, "To see, forever yours." "A locket," Hastings said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "Clara's? But who's the chap?" Poirot closed the locket, slipping it into his pocket. "A question for another moment, mon ami. This locket, it is another thread in our tapestry. But the maze itself, it tells us something more. It is a place of concealment, yet someone wished Clara to be found here, or at least her traces." They retraced their steps, emerging from the maze as the mist began to lift. Tom awaited them, his face anxious. "Find anything, sir?" Poirot held up the scrap of fabric. "This, Monsieur Tom, belonged to Mademoiselle Clara. Tell me, who else was in the maze yesterday?" Tom scratched his head. "Just the guests for the tour. Miss Eleanor, Lord Cedric, Mr. Julian, and Miss Margaret. Oh, and Lady Beatrice checked the paths afterward to ensure all was in order." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the keys, they remained with you and Mr. Grayson?" "Aye, sir. Never left my sight, nor his, far as I know." As they returned, to the manor Poirot's mind churned. The locked maze, the torn dress, the locket, all pointed to a deliberate act, yet the motive remained elusive. In the drawing-room they found Margaret, who gasped at the sight of the fabric. "That's Clara's dress. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, was she hurt?" Poirot's voice was calm. "We do not yet know, mademoiselle. But tell me, did Clara ever speak of a locket, or a man from her past?" Margaret's eyes widened, then darted away. "A locket? No, she never mentioned it. But she was so secretive lately, always slipping off alone." Poirot dismissed her gently, turning to Hastings. "The maze, Hastings. It is a mirror of this mystery. Complex, deceptive, and locked to all but a few. Someone brought Clara there, or drove her to flee. We must discover who held the key, and why." The manor's clock chimed noon, a stark reminder of the approaching wedding. As the guests gathered for luncheon, their faces etched with worry, Poirot felt the weight of the puzzle pressing upon him. The shadow of suspicion had deepened, and the maze had revealed its secrets only to pose new questions. Chapter 5. A Whisper from the Past. The afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows of Ashbourne Manor's library, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the oak-panelled walls. Hercule Poirot stood amidst towering bookshelves, his gloved fingers tracing the spines of leather-bound volumes. The discovery of Clara Winthrop's torn dress and the mysterious locket in the garden maze had sharpened his focus, and the cryptic note from her chamber, "The truth lies in the shadows," echoed in his mind. The manor's secrets, he sensed, were rooted not only in the present, but in a past that refused to stay buried. Captain Hastings, perched on a ladder, sneezed as he disturbed a dusty tome. "I say, Poirot, this place is a labyrinth of its own. What are we looking for, exactly?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon ami, we seek the whispers of history. Mademoiselle Clara was curious about the Ashbourne family, no? The library, it is where secrets are kept, and where Clara perhaps uncovered something dangerous." Their morning had been spent in the village where Poirot had sought out the vicar, Mr. Timothy Wells, a kindly man with a memory as sharp as his sermons were long. Over tea in the vicarage, Wells had recounted a tragedy from 5 years prior, the death of Robert Langley, a young man who had courted Clara and frequented Ashbourne Manor. Langley had drowned in the manor's lake under mysterious circumstances, ruled an accident, but whispered to be something more sinister. Clara, the vicar recalled, had been inconsolable, blaming herself for reasons she never fully explained. Clara spoke of guilt, Wells had said, his voice heavy. "She came to me months after, saying she'd failed Robert, that she should have warned him. I urged her to let it go, but she seemed haunted. Now in the library, Poirot sought evidence of that haunting. He directed Hastings to search for family records, while he examined a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon, found in a locked drawer of a writing desk. The letters, dated 5 years ago, were addressed to Clara from Robert Langley. Their tone was ardent, filled with promises of love, but one letter stood out, its ink smudged as if by tears. "Clara, I know the truth about the Ashbournes. Meet me by the lake tonight. We must act, or all is lost." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Regardez, Hastings. This letter, it is a window into the past. Robert Langley knew something, and Clara, she carried his secret." Hastings climbed down, peering at the letter. "Good heavens, Poirot! You think Clara's disappearance is tied to this old tragedy? But why now?" Poirot's fingers steepled. "The wedding, mon ami. It brings the past into the present. Clara's questions, her meetings, her fear, all point to a truth she uncovered, a truth someone wishes to keep hidden." Their search was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Grayson, the butler, his face etched with concern. "Monsieur Poirot, Lady Beatrice requests your presence in the drawing-room. She's displeased about the continued disruption." Poirot smiled faintly. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. But first, tell me, 5 years ago, when Monsieur Langley died, was Mademoiselle Clara at the manor?" Grayson's eyes flickered. "She was, sir. A guest for the summer. She was close to Mr. Langley, and his death. It shook her terribly. She left soon after." "And who else was present that summer?" Poirot pressed. Grayson hesitated. "Miss Eleanor, of course, Lord Cedric, Mr. Julian, and Lady Beatrice, a few other guests long gone now." Poirot dismissed the butler, turning to Hastings. "The players, they are the same. The stage, it is set again. We must learn what Clara discovered in these walls." Back in the drawing-room, Lady Beatrice awaited, her posture rigid. "Monsieur Poirot, this obsession with the past is unseemly. Clara's absence is a personal matter, not a historical conspiracy." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Madame, the past, it casts long shadows." Mademoiselle Clara was troubled by a letter, by memories of Monsieur Langley. "Did she speak to you of him?" Lady Beatrice's fan snapped shut. Robert Langley was a foolish young man who drank too much and wandered too close to the lake. Clara was distraught, yes, but she moved on. "I suggest you focus on the present." Poirot bowed, but his mind was elsewhere. The letters, the vicar's words, the locket, all pointed to a connection between Clara's disappearance and Langley's death. He resolved to speak with Margaret again, suspecting her grief held more than she had revealed. They found Margaret in the rose garden, clutching a handkerchief. Her eyes widened at Poirot's approach. "Monsieur Poirot, any news of Clara?" Poirot's voice was gentle. "Mademoiselle, I must ask about Robert Langley. Your cousin, she felt guilt over his death. Did she ever share why?" Margaret's breath hitched. She said she'd seen something that night by the lake. Someone with Robert, arguing. She wouldn't say who, only that it haunted her. She thought someone might blame her for knowing. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And recently, did she mention this again?" Margaret nodded, tears spilling. "A week ago, she said she'd received a letter, warning her to stay silent. She was terrified, Monsieur Poirot." As they left the garden, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, this is chilling. Someone's covering up a murder, aren't they?" Poirot's expression was grave. "Perhaps, Hastings, or perhaps it is something more complex. A secret worth silencing. The little grey cells, they tell me Clara's fear was not imagined." The manor's clock struck 3, its chimes a stark reminder of time slipping away. The wedding loomed, and with it the pressure to find Clara. Poirot felt the weight of the past pressing upon the present, a whisper of tragedy that threatened to unravel the truth. Chapter 6. The Midnight Masquerade. The grand ballroom of Ashbourne Manor glowed under the light of a dozen chandeliers, their crystals scattering prisms across the polished marble floor. Despite Clara Winthrop's disappearance, now stretching into its second day, Lady Beatrice had insisted the wedding festivities continue, and tonight's masked ball was the centrepiece. Guests in elaborate costumes, harlequins, Venetian nobles, and mythical figures swirled to the strains of a waltz, their laughter tinged with unease. Hercule Poirot, clad in a simple black domino mask that did little to conceal his distinctive moustache, stood by a gilded pillar, his keen eyes scanning the crowd. Captain Hastings, dressed as a cavalier with a feathered hat, adjusted his mask uncomfortably. "I say, Poirot, this feels all wrong. Clara's missing, and here we are, dancing as if nothing's happened. Shouldn't we be searching?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Mon ami, the search, it continues even here. In the masquerade, the masks conceal the face, but they reveal the soul. Observe the guests, their movements, their whispers. The guilty, they cannot hide forever." The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of colour and motion. Eleanor Ashbourne, radiant, in a silver gown and a swan-feathered mask, danced with Lord Cedric, whose golden lion mask matched his confident stride. Margaret, Clara's cousin, lingered near the refreshment table, her butterfly mask askew, her eyes darting nervously. Julian Harrow, Cedric's brother, moved through the crowd in a dark phantom costume. his brooding presence drawing curious glances. Lady Beatrice, resplendent as a Renaissance queen, presided over the event with a steely grace, her mask adorned with emeralds. Poirot's attention was drawn to a secluded alcove where Julian and Margaret stood in hushed conversation. He edged closer, his steps silent on the marble, catching fragments of their words. "It's too late to change things now," Julian hissed, his voice low. "You should have stayed out of it like she did." Margaret's reply was sharp, trembling. "Clara didn't stay out of it, and now look what's happened. We have to settle this, Julian, before—" Their voices dropped as a passing couple interrupted, and Poirot withdrew, his mind cataloguing the exchange. "Settle what, I wonder?" he murmured to himself. The mention of Clara's name, the urgency in their tones, it was a thread he would tug later. As the orchestra struck up, a lively gavotte, Poirot mingled among the guests, his ears attuned to every snippet of gossip. A footman whispered of Clara's secretive meetings near the stables, echoing the butler's earlier account. A dowager in a peacock mask speculated that Clara had eloped, a theory Poirot dismissed with a mental shake of his head. Clara's torn dress, her locket, her cryptic note, all spoke of fear, not flight. The clock neared midnight, and the atmosphere grew feverish, the masks lending a reckless edge to the revelry. Poirot's gaze settled on Cedric, who had abandoned Eleanor to converse with a masked figure in a crimson cloak near the terrace doors. Their gestures were tense, and Cedric's hand gripped the other's arm briefly before they parted. Poirot made a note to investigate Cedric's connections further. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the music, halting the dancers. The crowd parted as a young maid, her face pale beneath her simple mask, pointed toward the terrace. "It's hers! I swear it's hers!" she cried, holding aloft a delicate pearl earring, its design unmistakable as part of Clara's set from the rehearsal dinner. Poirot and Hastings hurried to the terrace where a small crowd had gathered. The maid, trembling, handed the earring to Poirot. "I found it, sir, near the stables by the path to the maze. It was just lying there in the gravel." Poirot examined the earring, its pearl glinting in the moonlight. "Merci, mademoiselle. This is most significant. Was anyone else near the stables when you found it?" The maid shook her head. "No, sir, but I heard footsteps running just before I saw it. I thought it was the wind, but now—" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Footsteps, you say? And in which direction?" "Toward the maze, sir, or maybe the lake." "It was hard to tell," the guests murmured, their masks unable to hide their growing fear. Lady Beatrice appeared, her voice sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, this is enough. These discoveries are distressing my guests. Find Clara and end this disruption." Poirot bowed. "Madame, the earring, it is a beacon. It points us closer to the truth. I shall not rest until it is found." As the ball resumed its merriment now forced, Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the terrace, the night air cool against their faces. Hastings clutched the earring, wrapped in his handkerchief. "Another clue, Poirot, but it's grim, isn't it? First the glove, then the dress, now this. It's as if someone's leaving a trail." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice grave. "A trail or a taunt. Someone wishes us to follow, but to what end? The stables, the maze, the lake, these are the stages of this mystery, and we must tread carefully." Poirot's gaze swept the darkened grounds, where shadows danced in the moonlight. The masquerade had revealed more than hidden faces. It had exposed alliances, fears, and secrets. As the music swelled behind them, Poirot felt the puzzle tightening, the pieces of Clara's disappearance drawing closer to a pattern only his little grey cells could decipher. Chapter 7. The Secret Beneath the Chapel. The morning after the masked ball, Ashbourne Manor seemed to hold its breath, the weight of Clara Winthrop's absence pressing heavier with each passing hour. The wedding loomed mere hours away, yet the festive spirit had eroded, replaced by whispers and wary glances. Hercule Poirot, his black suit immaculate despite the early hour, stood in the manor's entrance hall, his eyes fixed on a Gothic archway leading to the private chapel. The discovery of Clara's earring near the stables had tightened the web of clues, and a new lead had emerged, a maid's tale of strange noises echoing from the chapel at night. Captain Hastings, rubbing sleep from his eyes, joined Poirot, his voice low. "I say, Poirot, a chapel now. This case gets queerer by the minute. Do you really think Clara's tied to some midnight racket in there?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mon ami, the noises, they are not mere fancy. The maid, she is young, but her ears do not deceive. The chapel, it is a place of sanctity, oui, but also of secrets. Let us see what it conceals." They crossed the hall, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor, and entered the chapel through a heavy oak door. The interior was a study in Gothic splendour. Vaulted ceilings soared above stained-glass windows depicting saints, their colours muted in the dawn light. Pews of polished walnut lined the nave, and a marble altar stood at the far end, adorned with wilting lilies from the wedding preparations. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of wax and age. Poirot's gaze swept the space, lingering on the shadows pooling in the corners. "Hastings, observe the floor. The stones, they are uneven in places, no?" Hastings squinted, noticing a faint irregularity near the altar. "You're right, Poirot. Looks like some stones are looser than others. Think there's something under there?" Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of a large flagstone. With a gentle press it shifted, revealing a rusted iron ring embedded in the stone. He exchanged a glance with Hastings, who fetched a candelabra for light. Together they heaved the stone aside, exposing a narrow trapdoor leading to a dark passage below. Dust motes danced in the flickering candlelight, and a faint musty odour rose from the depths. "Good Lord, Poirot!" Hastings whispered. "A secret passage? This is like something out of a Gothic novel." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, mon ami. The Gothic, it is not merely aesthetic, it is a cloak for secrets. Come, we descend." The passage led to a cramped crypt, its walls lined with ancient stone sarcophagi, their inscriptions worn by time. Cobwebs draped the corners, and the air was thick with the weight of centuries. Poirot's candle cast eerie shadows as he examined the space, his attention drawn to a small alcove where a wooden box lay half buried in dust. Inside, he found a single sheet of parchment, yellowed with age, bearing a coded message, a series of numbers and symbols arranged in a grid. "Hastings, regardez!" Poirot held the parchment to the light. "This is no ordinary note. It is a cipher, and I suspect it holds a key to Mademoiselle Clara's fate." Hastings peered at the symbols, baffled. "A cipher? But what's it doing down here, and how's it connected to Clara?" Poirot's fingers tapped his temple. "The chapel. It is a place of refuge, but also of concealment. Clara, she was curious, poking into old books, asking questions. Perhaps she found this crypt, this cipher, and it led her into danger." They emerged from the crypt, sealing the trapdoor behind them, and returned to the chapel just as Mr. Grayson, the butler, appeared, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, Lady Beatrice is most insistent you join her for breakfast. She's concerned about the wedding schedule." Poirot nodded, slipping the parchment into his pocket. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. But first, tell me, has anyone else been seen entering the chapel recently, perhaps at night?" Grayson hesitated. "Not that I've seen, sir, but the maids have talked of noises, creaks, footsteps. I thought it was just the old manor settling." "And Mademoiselle Clara, did she ever visit the chapel?" Poirot pressed. Grayson's eyes flickered. "Once or twice, sir, during her stay. She seemed drawn to it, always lingering near the altar." As Grayson departed, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The noises, the cipher, Clara's visits. The chapel is a nexus, Hastings. Someone used this place, perhaps to meet, perhaps to hide. They joined the breakfast gathering in the dining hall, where the wedding party sat in strained silence." Eleanor's eyes were red-rimmed, Cedric's jaw tight, and Margaret clutched a teacup, her knuckles white. Lady Beatrice presided with her usual authority, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hand as she poured tea. "Monsieur Poirot," she said sharply, "I trust you're making progress. The wedding is tomorrow, and we cannot afford further delays." Poirot bowed. "Madame, the progress, it is steady. But I must ask, does the chapel hold any significance to the Ashbourne family? Perhaps a hidden history?" Lady Beatrice's cup clinked against its saucer. "The chapel is merely a place of worship, monsieur. Nothing more." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, madame, it whispers of secrets. I shall listen closely." As breakfast concluded, Poirot's mind churned. The cipher, the crypt, Clara's curiosity, all pointed to a secret buried beneath the manor's sanctity. The wedding's approach heightened the urgency, and Poirot knew the next clue would bring him closer to the truth, or to danger. Chapter 8. The Duel of Motives. The late morning sun cast long shadows across the drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor, where Hercule Poirot stood before a crackling fire, his posture as precise as his thoughts. The discovery of the coded message in the chapel's crypt had sharpened his focus. Each clue, Clara's torn dress, her locket, her earring, and now the cipher, forming a constellation of secrets. The wedding of Eleanor Ashbourne and Lord Cedric Harrow was mere hours away, yet Clara Winthrop's absence loomed larger, a spectre threatening to unravel the manor's carefully curated facade. Captain Hastings, pacing near a window, clutched a cup of tea, his face etched with frustration. "Poirot, we've got clues galore, but no Clara. The cipher, the crypt, it's all so cryptic. How do we make sense of it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching. "Mon ami, the clues, they are like notes in a symphony. Alone, they are mere sounds, but together they form a melody of truth." Today we shall conduct a little duet, a duel of motives to see who falters." Poirot had requested a private meeting with Lady Beatrice, Lord Cedric, and Margaret, the three whose connections to Clara seemed most tangled. He began with Lady Beatrice, who entered the drawing-room with the air of a queen, her silk gown rustling. Her emerald brooch glinted, a silent challenge to Poirot's scrutiny. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice smooth, "the disappearance of Mademoiselle Clara. It is no accident. She uncovered something, perhaps in the library or the chapel, that threatened someone. You warned her against prying into old books. Why?" Lady Beatrice's lips tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, Clara was impulsive, meddling in matters that didn't concern her. The Ashbourne family has its privacies, as all old families do. I wished to protect her from stirring up trouble." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And what trouble, madame? A financial matter, perhaps? I have learned that Mademoiselle Clara was to inherit a significant sum from a trust, one tied to the Ashbourne estate. Her presence at the wedding, it was inconvenient, Miss Beatrice's." Fan snapped shut, her composure cracking. "How dare you? The trust is a family matter, and Clara's inheritance was secure. I had no reason to wish her gone." Poirot noted the flush in her cheeks, dismissing her with a polite bow. As she left, Hastings whispered, "Good Lord, Poirot, you think Lady Beatrice had a financial motive?" "Perhaps, Hastings," Poirot replied. "Money, it is a powerful motive, but not the only one. Let us see what Lord Cedric reveals." Cedric entered, his lion-like confidence dimmed by fatigue. He slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. "Monsieur Poirot, this is madness. Clara's probably off sulking somewhere. Can't we focus on the wedding?" Poirot's voice was calm, probing. "Monsieur, you told Mademoiselle Clara to stop asking about your brother Julian's time abroad. Was this because she discovered something you wished to keep hidden?" Cedric's eyes narrowed. "She was nosy, that's all. Asked about Julian's work in Italy, his associates. I told her it was none of her business. My family's had enough scandal without her digging up old stories." "And these stories," Poirot pressed, "they involve the death of Robert Langley, no? Clara was close to him, and perhaps she knew more than she should." Cedric stood abruptly, his fists clenched. "Leave Langley out of this. He was a fool who drowned himself in drink. Clara's disappearance has nothing to do with him." Poirot watched Cedric storm out, his outburst a crack in his polished veneer. Hastings shook his head. "He's touchy, Poirot. Think he's hiding something?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said. "But hiding what? Guilt, fear, or merely irritation? Now, for Mademoiselle Margaret." Margaret entered, her butterfly-like fragility more pronounced, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Monsieur Poirot, I can't bear this. Clara's gone, and everyone's acting as if the wedding must go on." Poirot's tone was gentle. "Mademoiselle, you said Clara received a threatening letter. Did she share its contents, or perhaps hint at who sent it?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "She only said it warned her to stay silent about the past. She was so frightened, Monsieur Poirot, but she wouldn't tell me more. I should have pressed her." Poirot patted her hand. "You have helped, mademoiselle. One last question. Did Clara ever mention the chapel, or a cipher?" Margaret's breath hitched. "The chapel? She did go there a few days ago. Said she was looking for answers. I thought she meant prayer." As Margaret left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his mind racing. The chapel, the trust, the past, these are the threads we weave. Now, Hastings, we set a trap. Poirot instructed Mr. Grayson to spread a rumour among the staff. A coded message had been found in the chapel, and Poirot was close to deciphering it. By luncheon, the news had rippled through the manor, and Poirot watched the guests closely. Lady Beatrice's fan fluttered faster. Cedric avoided his gaze, and Margaret seemed on the verge of collapse. As they stepped into the garden, a groundskeeper approached, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, I saw something last night near the lake, a figure moving quick-like toward the maze. Couldn't see who, but it wasn't right." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, monsieur. The trap, it begins to spring." The manor's clock struck 1, its chimes a reminder of the ticking hours. Poirot felt the puzzle tightening. The motives, money, secrets, revenge, clashing like swords in a duel. The truth was near, but the shadows of Ashbourne Manor held it just out of reach. Chapter 9. The Ghost of Ashbourne Lake. The mist hung low over Ashbourne Manor's grounds, shrouding the lake in a spectral haze as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way along the dew-slick path. The groundskeeper's report of a shadowy figure near the lake the previous night had ignited Poirot's curiosity, especially after the trap he had set by spreading rumours of the chapel's cipher. Clara Winthrop's disappearance, now in its 3rd day, cast a pall over the impending wedding, and the manor's secrets seemed to ripple beneath the surface, much like the lake itself. Hastings pulled his coat tighter, his breath visible in the chill air. "Poirot, this lake gives me the shivers. First Clara's glove, now this figure skulking about, and those local legends about a ghost. Do you think there's anything to them?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes scanning the misty shoreline. "Mon ami, ghosts are but stories, born of guilt or fear. The figure seen last night, it was no spirit but flesh and blood. And the lake, it calls to us not by chance, but by design. The lake lay still, its surface a mirror reflecting the skeletal branches of overhanging willows. Reeds swayed gently, and the air carried a faint tang of damp earth. Poirot's polished shoes sank slightly into the soft ground as he approached the spot where Clara's glove had been found days earlier. He paused, his gaze drawn to a flash of colour among the reeds, a pale green scarf, its silk catching the faint sunlight. "Hastings, regardez!" Poirot knelt, carefully retrieving the scarf with his handkerchief. "This is Mademoiselle Clara's, no? The same she wore at the rehearsal dinner." Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot! Another clue by the lake? But it's too convenient, isn't it? First the glove, now this." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, mon ami. The scarf, it is not lost, it is placed. Someone wishes us to believe Clara met her fate here. But the little grey cells, they protest. The scarf is clean, untouched by mud or water. It was left recently, perhaps last night, by the figure the groundskeeper saw. They circled the lake, Poirot's cane probing the ground for further signs. The mist thickened, muffling their footsteps, and the manor loomed faintly in the distance, its towers like sentinels. Hastings shivered, recalling the vicar's tale of Robert Langley's drowning 5 years prior. "Do you think Clara's disappearance is tied to Langley's death?" Poirot. This lake seems cursed. Poirot's voice was firm. Cursed, no, but significant, oui. Langley's death, Clara's guilt, her questions. They are threads in the same tapestry. We must seek another witness, someone who saw beyond the manor's walls. Their search led them to a crumbling cottage on the estate's edge, home to Elias Thorne, a reclusive artist known for his haunting landscapes of the lake. Thorne, a gaunt man with paint-stained fingers and wary eyes, admitted them reluctantly, his studio cluttered with canvases depicting misty waters and ghostly figures. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot began, his tone courteous, "you observe the lake often, no? Have you seen Mademoiselle Clara Winthrop recently? Or perhaps another figure near its shores?" Thorne's brush paused mid-stroke, his gaze flickering. "I keep to myself, Monsieur Poirot. But, yes, I saw her 3 nights ago before she vanished. She was by the lake, arguing with a man. I couldn't see his face, too dark, and I was too far. She looked frightened, kept backing away." Poirot leaned forward. "And this man, monsieur? Any detail you recall? His height, his manner?" Thorne frowned, setting his brush aside. "Tall, I think. Moved quick like he was angry. I heard Clara say something about a letter. Then she turned and ran toward the maze. I didn't follow. None of my business." Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot. "A letter again, Poirot. The same one Eleanor mentioned, or the threatening one Margaret spoke of." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Merci, Monsieur Thorne. You have been most helpful. One final question. Last night, did you see anyone by the lake?" Thorne hesitated. "I saw movement, yes, near the reeds. Someone in a cloak, moving fast. Didn't stay long. That's all I know." As they left the cottage, the mist began to lift, revealing the lake's eerie calm. Poirot clutched the scarf, his thoughts a whirlwind. The artist's account, Hastings, it confirms Clara's fear, her flight to the maze. The scarf, the figure last night, they are distractions meant to mislead us. Back at the manor, they found the wedding party in the drawing room, their faces strained. Lady Beatrice, overseeing final preparations, fixed Poirot with a steely gaze. "Monsieur Poirot, yet another discovery. This is becoming tiresome." Poirot held up the scarf, watching her reaction. "Madame, this was found by the lake, but it tells us not of Clara's fate, but of someone's deception. Who among you was abroad last night?" The room fell silent, eyes darting. Cedric shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's hands trembled, and Julian's brooding stare met Poirot's without flinching. Lady Beatrice's fan fluttered, but she said nothing. As they dispersed, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, we're close, aren't we? The lake, the maze, the letter. It's all pointing to someone in this room." Poirot's voice was grave. "Oui, Hastings. The ghost of Ashbourne Lake is no spirit, but a shadow cast by the guilty. We must tread carefully, for the truth is near, and it is dangerous." The manor's clock struck noon, its chimes a stark reminder of the wedding's approach. Poirot felt the puzzle's pieces aligning, but the final pattern remained just beyond his grasp. Chapter 10. The Unravelling Alibi. The drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor was steeped in tension, its heavy drapes muffling the late afternoon light, as Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled wedding party. The clock ticked toward the eve of Eleanor Ashbourne's wedding to Lord Cedric Harrow. Yet Clara Winthrop's disappearance, now in its third day, cast a shadow over every face. The scarf found by the lake, the artist's account of Clara's argument, and the coded message from the chapel's crypt had tightened the web of clues. Poirot, his suit immaculate and his moustache perfectly waxed, exuded a calm that belied the storm brewing in his little grey cells. Captain Hastings, seated near the fireplace, whispered, "Poirot, this feels like the calm before a storm. You're about to shake things up, aren't you?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, when the alibis are woven with lies, one must tug the threads to see which unravel. Observe, Hastings, and you shall see the guilty falter." The room was crowded with familiar figures. Eleanor, pale but composed. Cedric, his jaw tight. Lady Beatrice, her fan a restless flutter. Julian, brooding in a corner. And Margaret, Clara's cousin, her eyes red and haunted. Mr. Grayson, the butler, stood by the door, his presence a silent reminder of the manners. Watchful eyes. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "Mademoiselle Clara Winthrop has vanished, leaving behind a trail of clues. Her glove, her dress, her earring, her scarf. Each points to danger, yet each is placed with care, as if to lead us astray. I have heard your stories, your alibis, but they do not align. Let us examine them, non?" He turned to Eleanor first, his gaze gentle but unyielding. "Mademoiselle Ashbourne, you said you last saw Clara at the rehearsal dinner, yet you were in the garden earlier that day, near the rose arbour, where Clara was seen arguing. Why omit this?" Eleanor's hands clasped tightly. I forgot. It was nothing, just a walk. Clara was upset, but she wouldn't say why." Poirot nodded, moving to Cedric. "Monsieur Harrow, you claim you were with guests during the dinner, yet a footman saw you near the stables shortly after Clara left the table. Care to explain?" Cedric's face reddened. "I stepped out for air, that's all. The stables are on the way. I didn't see Clara." Poirot's eyes narrowed, turning to Lady Beatrice. "Madam, you insist Clara's prying into old books was harmless, yet you checked the library that night after she vanished. Were you looking for something she might have found?" Lady Beatrice's fan snapped shut. "I was ensuring order, Monsieur Poirot. The library is my domain. Your insinuations are tiresome." Poirot pivoted to Julian, his voice sharp. "Monsieur Julien, you spoke with Clara about your time in Italy, yet you evaded her questions. And last night, near the lake, a figure was seen. Was it you, perhaps, placing the scarf?" Julian's smirk was defiant. "I was in my room, monsieur. You've no proof otherwise. Clara's curiosity was her own trouble." Finally, Poirot faced Margaret, whose trembling hands betrayed her nerves. "Mademoiselle, you said Clara was frightened by a letter, yet you were overheard at the ball, speaking with Monsieur Julien about settling something. What pact did you share with Clara?" Margaret's eyes widened, her voice breaking. "No pact. I only meant we had to protect her. She knew something dangerous about the manor, about a fortune hidden here. She told me to stay quiet, but I couldn't." The room gasped, and Poirot seized the moment, producing the coded parchment from the chapel's crypt. "This cipher, found beneath the chapel, speaks of a hidden fortune. tied to the Ashbourne family. Mademoiselle Clara, she discovered it. None? And someone wished her silenced. Margaret crumpled, sobbing. She found papers in the library, old deeds. She said they proved a secret trust, one the family didn't want known. I begged her to stop, but she was determined. Cedric stood, his voice sharp. That's nonsense. There's no fortune, no trust. Clara was delusional. Lady Beatrice's fan froze, her eyes darting to Cedric. Julian's smirk faded, and Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting each reaction. The alibis, they unravel, he said softly. The truth, it is close, but it hides behind fear. As the guests dispersed, shaken, Hastings approached. Poirot. Good heavens, Poirot! A hidden fortune! That's motive enough for murder. But who's behind it? Poirot's fingers steepled. The fortune, Hastings. It is the heart of this mystery. Clara's questions, her discoveries, they threatened. Someone's power. The cipher. It holds the key, and I shall decipher it. A sudden shout from the hall interrupted them. A maid rushed in, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, sir. The groundskeepers found something in the maze, a hairpin, like Miss Clara's. Poirot's expression hardened. The maze again, Hastings. The threads tighten, but the guilty, they grow desperate. Come, we must follow this new clue. In. Manners' clock struck 5. Its chimes a stark reminder of the wedding's imminent approach. Poirot felt the puzzle's pieces shifting, the alibis crumbling under the weight of truth. The shadow of Clara's fate loomed ever closer, and he knew the next move would be critical. Chapter 11. The Betrayal. Within. The twilight cast an amber glow over Ashbourne Manor, its towers silhouetted against a sky bruised with impending rain. The wedding of Eleanor Ashbourne and Lord Cedric Harrow was mere hours away, yet the absence of Clara Winthrop, now missing for 3 days, hung like a shroud over the estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, surrounded by the musty scent of old books, his fingers tracing the edges of the coded parchment from the chapel's crypt. The hairpin found in the maze, Clara's scarf by the lake, and Margaret's revelation of a hidden fortune had tightened the web of clues, but the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. Captain Hastings, leafing through a stack of dusty ledgers, sighed. Poirot, this case is a maze itself. Clara was blackmailing someone, you say. That's a dangerous game, especially with a fortune involved. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching. Oui, mon ami, Mademoiselle Clara. She was no mere bridesmaid. She was a player in a game of secrets, and her knowledge, it was her weapon and her downfall. Let us reconstruct her final hours. Poirot had spent the afternoon piecing together witness accounts. The artist, Elias Thorne, had seen Clara arguing by the lake 3 nights ago, fleeing toward the maze. The maid, Elsie, had spotted her near the rose arbour, speaking with a man. The butler, Mr. Grayson, confirmed Clara's visits to the library, where she pored over old deeds. Margaret's tearful confession revealed Clara's discovery of a secret trust, one tied to the Ashbourne estate, which she used to blackmail someone. A dangerous act that likely led to her disappearance. Poirot crossed to a writing desk, where he'd found Clara's notebook, its pages filled with cryptic jottings, references to the trust, Langley's, proof, and a date 5 years ago. The night Robert Langley drowned." "Hastings," Poirot said, holding up the notebook. "Clara was not merely curious. She was hunting. She found documents proving a hidden fortune, perhaps concealed by the Ashbournes to protect their wealth. She threatened to expose it." Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot! Blackmail! No wonder someone wanted her gone. But who?" Poirot's fingers steepled. "To answer that, we must confront the one whose secrets are most at risk. Come, we seek Lord Cedric." They found Cedric in the billiard-room, alone, his face drawn as he leaned over the table, cue in hand. The clack of balls ceased as Poirot entered, his presence commanding. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot began, his voice steady. "Mademoiselle, Clara knew of a secret trust, one that could disrupt the Ashbourne fortune. She spoke to you of this, non? And you, perhaps, felt threatened." Cedric's cue dropped, his eyes flashing. "What are you implying, Poirot? Clara was a nuisance, yes, asking about my family, my finances, but I didn't hurt her." Poirot held up the notebook, watching Cedric's reaction. "This, monsieur, contains Clara's notes on a trust, one tied to your marriage to Mademoiselle Eleanor. Did Clara threaten to expose it, perhaps to delay the wedding?" Cedric's face paled, his voice low. She came to me a week ago, said she'd found papers in the library, claimed they proved the Ashbourne estate was built on a fraud, a trust hidden from creditors. She wanted money to stay quiet. I told her to go to blazes." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And where were you, monsieur, when Clara vanished from the rehearsal dinner?" Cedric hesitated, his fists clenching. "I told you, I stepped out for air. Yes, I went near the stables, but I didn't see her. I swear it." Poirot noted the sweat on Cedric's brow, dismissing him with a nod. As Cedric left, Hastings whispered, "He's rattled, Poirot. Think he's our man?" "No, Hastings," Poirot said softly. "And Cedric is guilty of secrets, oui, but of Clara's fate, I think not. The true culprit they hide in plain sight, watching our every move." Returning to the library, Poirot studied the cipher from the chapel, its grid of numbers and symbols, taunting him. He traced a pattern, his mind racing. "The cipher, Hastings. It is a map to the fortune. A vault perhaps hidden in the manor. Clara found it, and someone ensured she could not reveal it." A sudden commotion in the hall drew their attention. Margaret burst in, her face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, I found this in Clara's room, tucked in her Bible." She held out a crumpled letter, its seal broken, addressed to Clara. The message was brief. "Speak of the trust, and you join Langley in the lake." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This, mademoiselle, is the threat you spoke of. When did Clara receive it?" Margaret sobbed. "Days before the wedding. She showed it to me, said she'd confront the sender. I begged her not to." Poirot patted her shoulder, his mind churning. The letter, the cipher, Cedric's confession, all pointed to a betrayal within the manor's walls. Clara's blackmail had provoked a desperate act, but by whom? As night fell, the manor's clock struck 9, its chimes heavy with foreboding. Poirot felt the puzzle's pieces shifting, the betrayal within drawing closer to the surface. "Hastings," he said, "the truth is near, but it is a dangerous thing. We must prepare for the final act." Chapter 12. The Final Masquerade. The grand ballroom of Ashbourne Manor shimmered under the chandelier's glow, its opulence a stark contrast to the tension that gripped the wedding party. The morning of Eleanor Ashbourne's wedding to Lord Cedric Harrow had dawned, yet Clara Winthrop's disappearance, now spanning 3 days, demanded resolution before vows could be exchanged. Hercule Poirot, his black suit pristine and his moustache impeccably waxed, stood at the room's centre, his presence commanding as he prepared to unmask the truth. The clues, Clara's glove, scarf, torn dress, earring, locket, cipher, and threatening letter, had woven a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was ready to reveal its pattern. Captain Hastings, standing by the terrace doors, whispered, "Poirot, this feels like a high-stakes gamble. You're sure you know who did it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they do not gamble. They calculate. Tonight we recreate the night of Clara's disappearance, and the guilty, they shall betray themselves." The wedding party gathered, their faces a mix of dread and curiosity. Eleanor, clutching Cedric's arm, Lady Beatrice, her fan still, Julian, brooding, Margaret, trembling, and the staff, including Mr. Grayson and Elsie, hovering at the edges. Poirot had instructed the ballroom to be arranged as it was for the rehearsal dinner, with the same table, settings, lighting, and music, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant, "Mademoiselle Clara Winthrop vanished from this room 3 nights ago, leaving a trail of clues that seem to lead everywhere and nowhere. But the truth, it is not in the clues alone. It is in the hearts of those who hid it. Let us walk through that night, non?" He gestured to the table where Clara had sat, her empty chair a silent accusation. Clara was distressed, twisting, her shawl, glancing at the door. She had uncovered a secret, a hidden trust, a fortune concealed by the Ashbourne family, documented in old deeds she found in the library. She used this knowledge to blackmail someone, threatening to expose it. Unless paid, the room stirred, eyes darting. Poirot continued, pacing. That night she received a letter found in her Bible. "Speak of the trust, and you join Langley in the lake." This was no idle threat, for Clara knew of Robert Langley's death 5 years ago. A drowning she believed was no accident. She saw someone with him that night, arguing by the lake. Eleanor gasped, and Cedric's jaw tightened. Poirot raised a hand, producing the cipher from the chapel. This cipher, found in the crypt, was a map to a vault beneath the manor, where the trust's wealth was hidden. Clara deciphered it, and her knowledge made her a target. He turned to the terrace doors, where Clara had exited. She left the dinner, seeking air, or perhaps a meeting. The artist, Monsieur Thorne, saw her by the lake, arguing with a man, then fleeing to the maze. Her glove, scarf, dress, and earring were found, but not by chance. They were placed to mislead us. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But who placed them? Who knew of the trust, the cipher, and Clara's blackmail? Let us consider the alibis. Mademoiselle Eleanor, you were in the garden, yet omitted it. Monsieur Cedric, you were near the stables, yet denied seeing Clara. Madame Beatrice, you checked the library, perhaps to retrieve the deeds. Monsieur Julien, You evaded Clara's questions about Italy, where you had ties to questionable associates. Mademoiselle Margaret, you spoke of a pact to protect Clara. Margaret sobbed, but Poirot pressed on, his voice rising. One among you met Clara by the lake, followed her to the maze, and ensured she would not speak. That person is— A sudden cry interrupted. Julian stood, his face pale, pointing at Cedric. It was you, Cedric. Clara asked me about your debts in Italy, debts you hid from Eleanor. You needed the trust's money to save yourself. Cedric lunged, his voice hoarse. Lies! I told Clara to drop it, but I didn't hurt her. Lady Beatrice's fan fell, her voice sharp. Enough! Cedric, be silent! Poirot seized the moment, his voice cutting through. No, madam, it is you who must speak. You knew of the trust, for it was your father's doing, hidden to protect the estate. Clara's blackmail threatened your control. You met her by the lake, argued, and when she fled to the maze, you followed. The hairpin, it was yours, dropped in haste, mistaken for Clara's. Lady Beatrice's face drained of colour. Absurd! I was in my room. Poirot produced the locket from the maze, its inscription clear. This locket, it was Robert Langley's, given to Clara. You argued with him that night, madame, for he, too, knew of the trust. His death was no accident, and Clara's suspicions led her to you. The room froze as Lady Beatrice staggered, her composure shattered. I only wanted to protect Eleanor's future. Clara would have ruined us. I locked her in the crypt to silence her, but I meant no harm. Gasps filled the room. Poirot signalled Mr. Grayson, who fetched the authorities waiting outside. Clara is alive, madame, hidden in the crypt, as I discovered this morning. Your masquerade is over. As Lady Beatrice was led away, Eleanor sobbed in Cedric's arms, and Margaret collapsed in relief. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. The final masquerade, Hastings, reveals the truth beneath the masks. Chapter 13. The Little Grey Cells. Triumph, the morning sun bathed Ashbourne Manor in a golden glow, its rays piercing the lingering shadows that had cloaked the estate for days. The wedding of Eleanor Ashbourne and Lord Cedric Harrow was underway in the Manor's chapel, the air filled with the soft strains of a hymn and the rustle of silk gowns. Yet the joy was tempered by the recent unmasking of Lady Beatrice's crime, a revelation that had shaken the household to its core. Hercule Poirot, his black suit pristine and his moustache impeccably waxed, stood on the terrace overlooking the gardens, where guests mingled with cautious smiles. Beside him, Captain Hastings sipped a glass of champagne, his brow still creased. With wonder, "Poirot, old chap," Hastings said, "you've done it again. Clara's safe, the culprit's caught, and the wedding's going ahead. But I'm still reeling. How did you piece it all together?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, his fingers steepled. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they are never idle." The case of the Vanishing Bridesmaid was a tapestry of deception, woven with threads of greed, fear, and betrayal. Allow me to unravel it for you, as I have for the others. Earlier that morning, after Lady Beatrice's arrest, Poirot had gathered the wedding party in the drawing-room to explain his deductions. Clara Winthrop, pale but unharmed, sat beside Margaret, her hand clasped tightly in her cousin's. The crypt beneath the chapel, where Lady Beatrice had locked her to silence her blackmail, had been airless but secure, and Poirot's early morning search, guided by the cipher's clues, had freed her just in time. The room had listened in rapt silence as Poirot recounted the case. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot had begun. Mademoiselle Clara vanished not by accident, but by design. She discovered a secret trust, hidden by the Ashbourne family to shield their fortune from creditors. Old deeds in the library, a cipher in the chapel's crypt, these revealed a vault beneath the manor, filled with wealth. Clara, driven by her guilt over Robert Langley's death 5 years ago, used this knowledge to blackmail Lady Beatrice, demanding payment to stay silent. He had produced the threatening letter from Clara's Bible. This warned Clara to join Langley in the lake if she spoke. Langley, you see, had also uncovered the trust, and his argument with Lady Beatrice by the lake ended in his drowning, a crime she concealed as an accident. Clara, witnessing it, carried the guilt of silence, and her recent discoveries rekindled her resolve. Poirot paced, his voice rising with flair. The night of the rehearsal dinner, Clara was distressed, her shawl twisted, her eyes on the door. She left, intending to confront Lady Beatrice. They met by the lake, as the artist Monsieur Thorne saw. When Clara fled to the maze, Lady Beatrice followed, locking her in the crypt. The glove, scarf, dress, and earring were placed to mislead us, suggesting Clara's death, while the hairpin, Lady Beatrice's, mistaken for Clara's, betrayed her presence in the maze. Eleanor had sobbed, clutching Cedric's hand. "Mother, how could she?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Madame Beatrice acted to protect your future, mademoiselle, but her methods were monstrous. Her alibis unravelled under scrutiny. Her library, visits, her chapel checks, her reaction to the cipher's rumour. The locket, Langley's gift to Clara, found in the maze, confirmed her past crime." Margaret had hugged Clara, tears streaming. "I should have stopped her, Monsieur Poirot. She was so stubborn." Poirot smiled gently. Mademoiselle Clara's courage, it brought the truth to light, though at great risk. Now, on the terrace, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice reflective. "The clues, Hastings, they were like stars in a night sky, scattered yet forming a constellation. The note in Clara's room, 'The truth lies in the shadows,' was her own, a reminder to herself. The cipher, it mapped the vault, which the authorities now secure. Cedric's debts, Julian's evasions, Margaret's pact, they were distractions, but Lady Beatrice's motive, control of the fortune, was the heart of the crime." Hastings shook his head, marvelling. "You saw through it all, Poirot. But Clara's lucky to be alive. What happens now?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the chapel, where Eleanor and Cedric exchanged vows. "Lady Beatrice faces justice, Hastings. Clara, she will heal, though her heart carries scars. The wedding, it proceeds, a testament to love amidst betrayal." As the newlyweds emerged, guests cheered, tossing rose petals. Clara, in a simple dress, smiled weakly, supported by Margaret. Poirot watched, his expression poignant. "The human heart, mon ami, it is frail. Greed, fear, love, they drive us to folly. Yet the little grey cells, they triumph, bringing order to chaos." Hastings raised his glass. "To your grey cells, Poirot. Another case solved." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes warm. "And to you, Hastings, for your loyal heart. Now, let us join the celebration. for even in shadows there is light. The manor's clock struck noon, its chimes blending with laughter and music. As Poirot stepped into the crowd, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, Ashbourne Manor began to heal, its secrets laid bare by the triumph of his little grey cells.